And greetings. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show. We are live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzen, Auron MacIntyre. Going to be joined by our Blaze media colleague, Auron MacIntyre, for the Deace Group here in a moment. Coming up next hour, it'll be Feedback Friday. We are brought to you by our friends over at realestateagentsitrust.com. In these unprecedented times,
bing, 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 bing,
make sure you do not dare go into the Let's Go Brandon real estate market, even as they tempt you with these artificial interest rates cuts, as they are attempting to carry the carcass of Kamala across the finish line. Do not dare go in without an agent that you can trust. Thankfully, we made it as easy as pie. We created a website. It's literally called realestateagentsitrust.com. These are agents from across the country, a lot of them from right here in your audience with you at the Blaze. So you have values in common as well, and they have a proven, verified track record of success. So whether you want to get across town, across the country, where you really want to get is across the finish line with the dub, and they can help you do that. We'll find you an agent you can trust at realestateagentsitrust.com. Again, that is realestateagentsitrust.com. And with that, it is time for the Deace Group. Your weekly look at the week that was begins, as it always does, with Issue 1. Bleep, Lord Nefarious says,
"Joy cometh in the morning."
The notion that we in law enforcement have sought to intentionally allow individuals to cross the border illegally for the purpose of voting is preposterous.
They recognize, at least most people do, we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not at replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to keep growing the economy.
The incidents were limited to a handful of apartment complexes, and the mayor said our dedicated police officers have acted on those concerns. A handful of problems.
Only, Martha, do you hear yourself? Only a handful of apartment complexes in America were taken over by Venezuelan gangs.
And Senator Vance, he became a media darling. He wrote a book about the place he grew up, but the premise was trashing that place where he grew up rather than lifting it up. This guy's a venture capitalist cosplaying like he's a cowboy or something.
I do believe that this election is a litmus test for American tolerance for fascism. The elements of fascism are rooted in this nationalistic drive for more babies.
Put yourself in the mindset that the Trump campaign really doesn't think it can win either the popular vote or the Electoral College. You look at this campaign, it makes no sense. He's not trying to add voters. What they want to do is they want to win the election night until the inauguration. And if they can go in and they can violently disrupt these counting centers, how will states be able to certify elections? You burn down a counting center in Arizona. How does the governor certify those elections?
God, is there anything sexier than a man who is like men for Kamala?
I am running to be a president for all Americans. That being said, I do have clear eyes about the disparities that exist and the context in which they exist, meaning history, to your point. So my agenda, well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that.
If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
All right, let's get to it. Auron, as the guest, you get to go first.
I'm just sipping.
Yeah. What was the worst of the worst that you just saw?
There's a lot to choose from there, but I'm going to go with it's only a handful of apartment complexes taken over by illegal gangs. Like, I think there's a name for that when armed men from a foreign country take over parts of your country.
Invasion?
It's called conquest.
Yeah. Do you guys know, can we go to is there a website? When is it a conquest.com where we all agree and we know what is the number of foreign national illegal alien criminal gangs? What is the number of U.S. sovereign properties and territories that they can take before it officially is an invasion? Do we have an agreed upon standard there?
Respectfully, Auron, it's only a handful of conquests at this point. So, let's all
perfectly
slow.
reasonable.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The Americans only had a handful of native lands that they ended up, moving into. So it's fine. We're all, as long as we all understand that's the standard.
Correct. Todd.
That's why I love the coffee sip beforehand. I mean, just casually talking about the downfall of Western civilization. Just dudes chatting. No big deal. I mean, nailed it, Auron. There's something a little understated in there, and I think it's how far we have come from the democratic liberalism that Steve thought he was fighting and got into this thing to fight, as he stated in many ways, and what we're dealing with now, and it's Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton visually is like the Gollum story. I mean, the dude is looking much closer to Jimmy Carter right now than he is to the old Billy playing the saxophone. The dude's looking rough.
By the way, can I just say props to the Democrats for making sure that Jimmy Carter voted before he died?
So say we all.
Yes, but anyway, go ahead. Yes.
So he's looking rough, but just think about that. The Bill Clinton charm offensive overall, not just the saxophone, but the messenger, all of that. The guy did. He made you feel hope-filled in many respects. And now, listen to how he's totally become part of the Borg. There's no, you have to understand, in order for the economy to keep going, we need to bring in the illegal immigrants, and that's just the math of the matter. I mean, what's the opposite of saxophone? Because that's it. There's just no music to it at all. And that's a perfect microcosm of the beginning of Steve's career and what he thought he was fighting then, and what all of us are fighting right now. I mean, he's just an utter shell of his former self. Not that he was, some brilliant moral leader back then, but he's not even trying to inspire you anymore. He's just telling you, plug into the Borg. That's all we can do.
What a phenomenal observation that is, when you stop and think about it. I mean, all my life on the right, I crack up whenever I hear, and a lot of us on the right say this, no one cares what celebrities think. Okay. The two most potent political brands that have existed on the right in my lifetime are a former actor and the world's biggest reality TV show star. Okay.
Correct.
And the man who's been subject of more tabloid stories than any celebrity in all of, tabloid media history. And that's not counting the ones that his buddies at the National Enquirer planted for him. Okay. So the idea that nobody cares what celebrities thinks, we don't even believe our own, feigned creed where that is concerned. All right. Everybody wants to be the next Reagan. And if this election goes the way that it looks like it's going to go right now for the next 20 years, the whole thing's going to be who's the next Trump. All right. Both men were some form of massive celebrity before they ever became a politician. So we have been fighting pop culture chic and cool on the right my entire, existence and knowledge of politics, to the point of, really just let's come up with this person guest starred on an episode of iRobot, okay, in 83. I mean, we will, all right, we will come up with any K-list, L-list celebrity we can find, all right, to feign some kind of pop culture cool on the right, trying to push back against this, which they've had in their favor really since JFK and the Brat Pack, frankly, all right? And you and I and Auron are probably old enough to remember the earth moved when Bill Clinton, the young boomer, 30 years ago, went on Arsenio Hall live and played the sax. The earth moved. All right. My wife will tell you that's like the very first political, event or interview live she can ever remember in her lifetime watching and being interested in.
He was so cool. He was the first black president.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it was Toni Morrison anointed him that back in the day. You bet. Yeah. And so to see now that it basically has gone from the Brat Pack to, the first black president, and GQ smooth and cool Barack Obama, what he represented, okay?
I know.
And now it literally is just Frog March.
Locutus.
Exactly. I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile. I mean, it's just now just a color revolution Frog March.
Yes.
There's not even an attempt. And when they try it now, like putting Jennifer Garner out there, and I think the world knows her choice in men, what a record she's got. Okay, but okay. I mean, somewhere Rob Lowe, who I think must have tagged every co-ed at the 1988 Democratic Convention, there's still stories about that, is like, what has happened to the Democratic Party? I mean, all of its cool factor, it's very cringe. I mean, the thing that was it Molly Shannon and Kamala Harris they produced for the Al Smith dinner last night?
I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard.
And I'm just like, I mean, I need Phil Hartman nailing Reagan for the Iran-Contra. I need Dana Carvey looking at his watch. By golly, in my day, you guys at least made us laugh when you demagogued us and disabused us publicly with your platforms. Where's a Genesis Land of Confusion video when you need it? For goodness sakes, this is just Soviet.
Yeah.
That observation, dude. Wow. That is something. And moving forward into the future, I know nobody on this panel necessarily is the stuff of TikTok videos and charisma and magnanimity.
Oh God, what are you going to make us do?
But there might be an opening there on the right moving forward. There might be. I mean, if all that's left now is everybody's racist, get in your jack boots and march like the frog you are. I there's some possibilities there. Aaron.
No, the opposite of Bill Clinton playing the saxophone is North Korea's Pink Lady. That's basically the aesthetic of the Democrat Party at this point. It has devolved to that point where they just get up there and say,
yes.
They just get up there and say, our dear leader has never pooped, and his daddy was born on a mountainside, immaculately conceived, or whatever the legend is about Kim Jong-un. So I think the worst. Let's go to Alejandro Mayorkas right off the top. Over under 2 weeks till we get a leaked memo from the Department of Homeland Security, from some figure within that agency or from that department, just openly opining about how many voters they think they can rely upon from the open borders. Okay, because starting with the Mueller probe, there have been a lot of stories, not all of them, but a lot of stories where it's like, this is real. This reads like crappy right-wing fiction, but it's actually real. I mean, when they tell you something is preposterous, when they tell you something is just a complete moronic conspiracy theory, the more they double down on that, the sooner we get confirmation that it's actually happening. Mm-hmm. So I'm going with Alejandro Mayorkas.
We could almost do a Mayorkas every week in this, couldn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he is something else now. Exit question. Pardon me. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the odds, based on what we saw on Fox News, that Kamala Harris could last 5 minutes with Joe Rogan, and 10 being the odds, Lindsey Graham also could not last 5 minutes with Joe Rogan. Rank this week's level of total depravity, Auron.
I'm going to go with 10. That was ridiculous.
Take another sip of coffee. Yeah, just another day. 10.
Aaron?
I'm like at a 7.5.
7.5? So I won't. I'm going to let it go. 50 now, turning over a new leaf. But if you are just going to dangle that out there, I just want you to know, It's very tempting.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was homeschooled.
Exactly. Issue 2, replacement theory confirmed.
Bill Clinton said the quiet part out loud this week again on immigration.
You had a case in Georgia not very long ago, didn't you? They made an ad about a young woman who'd been killed by an immigrant. Yeah, well, if they'd all been properly vetted, that probably wouldn't have happened. But if they're all properly vetted and that doesn't happen, and America is not having enough babies to keep our populations up. I don't think Americans are anti-immigration, they're anti-chaos, right? They don't want us to do more than we can, but they recognize, at least most people do, we got the lowest birth rate we've had in well over 100 years. We're not at replacement level, which means we got to have somebody come here if we want to keep growing the economy.
So what Bill Clinton has articulated here is the very essence of a replacement theory. Spend a generation encouraging native-born people to kill off an entire generation of their own offspring. And then once that has been successful, and you're down anywhere from 60 to 65 million of descendants, you then turn around and import a generation of foreigners to replace the native offspring that you encourage the natives to murder. The only question here, that is the very essence of a replacement theory. Is it the replacement theory? We can debate that. But that is a replacement theory. I mean, he even uses the word replacement there in those clips. So the only question is whether this is something that is merely a connecting of the dots of their own worldview, or it is a purposeful act. And if we put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth around Bill Clinton and asked him that question, and if you put the Wonder Woman lasso of truth, say, around Barack Obama and asked him that question, what would each of their answers be? Would they be different or would they be the same, Todd?
Now, I know what I just said about Bill Clinton. I don't think those two are the exact same. They certainly weren't the exact same men. I don't think they were. I think they might be different. And Bill Clinton there, in two separate instances, very casually says, we're not having enough babies. It would seem the obvious implication of that is we have to have more babies.
Yes.
And
which would require us killing fewer of them.
Killing fewer of them.
Yes.
But instead of that, he says out loud, not accidentally, we're not having enough babies. But then instead of the obvious implication, he goes off into just standard issue Obamaism, which is, I think he absolutely, this is a design, this is purposeful from the likes of Barack Obama. I think we'd be damn fools to Jesse Kelly's right about, this all started with him. He is the great community organizer. He succeeded beyond everybody's wildest imaginations to undermine the fundamentals of America. So I changed the opening question based off the rundown I gave you guys, based on what you said about a few minutes ago, the arc of watching Bill Clinton. And I'm trying to do my own math.
Yeah. So because to me, what the question belies is the following: it's all part of the plan from the beginning, right? Is Bill Clinton the dying dinosaur of a Democratic Party that doesn't exist out of the hippie boomer free love movement, really didn't contemplate the consequences of the counterculture they were installing and what they were putting into the mainstream? And Barack Obama now is the firstborn son of his Columbia professors Cloward and Piven, okay? And this is he is the embodiment of the long march through the institutions, the true believer, or was this always what this was from the very beginning?
Yeah, I think they would have different answers. I think Bill Clinton and Barack Obama would start with different answers. I think Bill Clinton's answer would be very short term. This is the corporatist short term math. We got to have more people to pick the tomatoes and pick the fill in the blank out in the fields. We're not doing the birth rate is following. This is a very short term solution. And by the way, if some of these end up staying here and they vote for Democrats, great. That's the premise that Barack Obama, what Bill Clinton, with the value added from Bill Clinton, I think what he would say is the premise for Barack Obama. The short term is winning elections by mass immigration. The long term, the bigger goal here is the mass homogenization of Western civilization, so that there are no uniform cultures. There's no unique national identity, that we're all just mixing together here so that there's no control groups to see who actually stands out in the long run. I think that's the more WEF, to use this term, globalist goal from immigration.
I think Auron, I set Auron up on one of the things he reminds his audience of a lot on Twitter. Bill Clinton's more too smart by half. He used to run the Democrat leadership, centrist Democrats, things like that. I just think he sees whatever is right before him and thinks, I can solve that problem. And so Auron's reminding people about like the magical soil theory of America, where you just, no matter who comes over, you just plot them here and they're suddenly Americans who love our ideals. I think somehow Bill Clinton believes that nonsense, but I don't think he, at his core, is the same as Barack Obama.
Auron?
Yeah, I think that what we're looking at here is ultimately driven by incentives. There's a political theorist called Bertrand Juvenal, and he has this idea of high and low versus middle, which is the idea that if a government wants to control, centralized power, it needs to hollow out the middle of its power base. It needs to hollow out the middle of its country, because these are the people who are established. These are the people who are able to push back. These are the people who have a history and connections and local networks. And if there's anyone who's going to be able to oppose the centralization of power, it is those people in the middle. And so a dynamic we see over and over again is importing a large amount of foreigners into a nation in order to undermine the established power that would rival the top power, the centralizing power in the nation. You can look at the Roman Empire. There's a similar dynamic here, where emperors that needed additional help kept bringing in too many immigrants until eventually it toppled the whole thing over. So what we're seeing here, I don't think, is unique to the United States. This is a classic power tactic. However, the way it concentrates itself is in the active replacement of the people of the United States. And because of our democratic mechanism, this is even more effective than it might be in other government structures, because if you can't convince the current population, if you just bring in a new population and amnesty them, because magic dirt, as soon as someone touches the soil, we can just make them American. They've gone to Walmart, so that they're American. That really is the way that they understand it. America is not a nation. It's not a people. And to be fair, the right has this problem too. We have spouted this nonsense for a very long time. We're just this propositional nation. The minute someone walks in, as long as they raise their hand and say, I love the Constitution, they're an American. No, sorry. I mean, great. There are people who over time can assimilate and can become part of the United States. I'm not saying that immigrants cannot eventually become Americans, but that process should be long. It should be, in many cases, I think, multi-generational. And the fact that we fed into this nonsense of the propositional nation is what makes a effort like the ones the Democrats are employing right now so easy, because they're really just piggybacking off of a notion that many people on the right have echoed. And we have to have a better understanding of what it means to be an American, because if we don't, then guys like Bill Clinton can just say things like, well, yeah, if we don't have babies, we just bring in new people who are going to have babies, and then they're America now. That logic makes sense when you have a country that's really just an economic zone being administered by WEF employees.
Well, we did spend, to be fair, we spent a decade thinking democracy was a plug and play, where we could just take it out of our laptops, put it on a flash drive, plug it into Middle Eastern laptops, and just, spit out democratic processes in Arabic instead of English. And, they would just be like, cool, bring your Walmarts and KFCs here and we'll become like you. And that didn't work out. And both parties did that for more than a decade. Or define for our audience, what did you call it?
The propositional
nation. Define for our audience what you mean by that, and then what you think the antithesis of that is or should be.
So when there's this little complicated, we have to go back to the understanding of what a nation is. Today, a lot of people think nation and country are the same thing because we're used to the idea of the nation state. But the nation state is actually a relatively new invention. It comes about from the Peace of Westphalia, and it's the idea that the people and the state are coterminous. They begin and end in the same thing. And so we understand that a state is the same thing as the people. It's run by the people and it's owned by the people. But actually, that's not been the case for most of history. And for most of history, people, our nations, are, in some way related. They have a history, they have a heritage, they have a tradition, they have a religion, they have an ethnos, they have a culture, a language. These things are what defined peoples. But today we just pretend like it's political borders. And particularly in the United States, we pretend like it's a set of values. We say, oh, well, if you believe in these values, free speech and I don't know, the free market or whatever, then you're an American. But the problem with the propositional nation is anyone who says that doesn't actually mean it, because one of our propositions is you have the ability to reject the government of the United States. You have an ability to reject the values of the United States. That's what free speech means. Mm-hmm. And so if assent to a proposition is what gives you citizenship or belonging inside a polity, and then you have the freedom to declare that you are no longer interested or believing in that, in that proposition, but you remain part of the polity, then your definition of the nation is fundamentally broken.
And it can also evolve based on who has taken you up on your proposition. Right.
Correct.
Right. So you're basically describing from a nation state standpoint what the spirit of the age did to the legal process. We moved beyond Blackstone's commentaries of the laws of England, natural law, organic law, and into legal positivism. And whichever body we ascribed the power to make law at the time, they get to determine what the law is. It's not based on something intrinsic or fundamental beyond a specific process outcome. That's essentially what you're describing from a nation state standpoint?
Correct. Again, Bertrand de Juvenal does a great work describing the fact that laws that people assent to emanate from the shared character of the people. It's a way,
or they should anyway.
Way of being.
They
exactly.
should. They don't right now in our way of life, but that's the way it ideally should be. Yes. Fascinating.
Yes.
Let's get to the exit question. What happens to the abortion issue on the right after this election? Because that could have to be some dots connected, I think, on both sides of the aisle on this issue after this election. So we talked about connecting the dots on their side to replacement theory. What happens to the abortion issue? Because they don't have that talking point if they don't have abortion to kill 60 million kids. So what happens to the issue on the right after this election? Aaron?
I don't think, regardless of the outcome, anything good right now. I think with the maybe lone exception of Florida, where it's still kind of up in the air whether Amendment 4 is going to pass or not. I don't think anything good will happen, because I think the instinct will be to say if they win, see, this is why we got to temper our tone on baby killing, and if they lose, well, it's because y'all didn't show up and y'all are expecting too much. And I'm not getting into the arguments here. We've hashed that out in great detail before, but I don't think anything good. It's just not in a good spot right now.
Todd?
Well, my answer is it's up to the church. And if the church continues to move forward as it has been, it won't be good. And if it decides to actually be the church, it'll be better, even if it's harder.
Auron?
I'm going to go with the MacIntyre consensus here and say that the Aaron is correct. That no matter which way it goes, the answer will be either we didn't need you and it wasn't that big of an impact, or you stayed home and therefore you junked the whole thing.
So damned if we do and damned if we don't, basically. But I mean, that's what you get when you've had largely rudderless leadership of an issue, and the bluff has been called, and now here we are. By the way, I got to call my own bluff. It was the Rat Pack. The Brat Pack was you and I's generation.
Yes, it was.
A couple of you corrected me in the inbox on that, so I wanted to do that. So the Brat Pack with Rob Lowe, because I said Rob Lowe earlier, so the name was on the tip of my tongue. Rob Lowe, Judd Hirsch, Emilio Estevez, Demi Moore. That's our generation. Okay, but
I'd also like to make
go ahead.
I'd also like to make it clear that I was only 8 when Bill Clinton was on Arsenio Hall. So I'm a little behind.
So you are with excuse for not falling for that. Then is what you're trying to say. I wasn't one of the people. You guys screwed that up. The older generation. You guys fell for that canard. Yes. All right. When we come back, I want us to discuss a case that we've just not had a chance to get to this week with everything else going on, but I think kind of is a window to the soul of a broken social compact, and we'll get to that here in a moment. Hey, this portion of the show brought to you by our friends over at MD Hearing, an FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid that cost a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. MD Hearing's Neo model cost over 90% less than clinical hearing aids. The Neo fits inside your ear, so no one's going to even know it's there. Plus, MD Hearing just launched the Neo XS, MD Hearing's smallest hearing aid ever. And they recently cut their price for that in half. That means you can get high-quality, rechargeable digital hearing aids for less than $300 a pair. You can't beat it. All right, so this holiday season, get the hearing you deserve with MD Hearing. Go to shopmdhearing.com and use promo code Steve to get a pair of hearing aids for just $300. Plus, they are adding, or less than $300, $297. Plus, they are adding a free extra charging case. That's a $100 value just for listeners of this show. That's shopmdhearing.com and use our promo code Steve and get a pair of hearing aids for just $297. You can't beat it. Shopmdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve. Going to welcome back in our colleague here at Blaze Media, Auron MacIntyre, as we march on with the weekly look at the week that was. Want to give you a bit of a warning before this next open here that you're going to see something that some of you may consider to be graphic, so I want you to be warned here. You get a count of 3, 3, 2, and 1. And with that, it is time for issue 3, Sydney Wilson.
Back on September 20th, Georgetown women's basketball had this posted on their X account. Quote, Georgetown women's basketball mourns the tragic loss of Sydney Wilson. Forever a Hoya. So what happened to Sydney Wilson to prompt that lauding tweet from Georgetown women's basketball? This.
How are you? Coach, question. Back up. Oh yeah. Hey man, I can also do it. Please back up. Oh yeah. Back up. Oh, yeah. Back up. Back up. Back up.
Back on September 12th, a mental health professional asked the Fairfax, Virginia County Police Department to conduct a welfare check on Wilson out of concern she was in an agitated state. And a crisis intervention trained officer, Peter Liu, arrived in Reston, Virginia around 10 o'clock in the morning. The video you just saw shows the aftermath of that welfare check, and it's another triumph of police-worn body cam footage, proving once again a narrative about so-called racism and police violence was complete bunk, as Auron pointed out earlier this week. That didn't stop some account named Evan Loves Wharf from commenting on Auron's post saying, quote, this was racism and abuse. He had a gun and she didn't. She was clearly having a psychotic episode. People having psychotic episodes do not deserve to be murdered. Anyway, here's a picture of the officer who showed up and got slashed by Wilson.
First question, if we cannot agree that stabbing a police officer multiple times, including in the face, is cause for a cop to defend themselves, then explain to me as a society what we could possibly agree on. Auron, I'll start with you.
Nothing. We can't. I mean, it's very clear that the left believes, and they really believe this, that it is your job to die if a person of color attempts to kill you. I mean, that's what that means. Oh, well, if someone has a psychotic break and literally stabs you in the face as you retweet or as you retreat, then it is your job to just die to that person. Don't defend yourself. They didn't deserve to die. That is the end of civilization. That's all that is. It's saying that there's a group of people in this country that cannot be policed because we have told some kind of myth about how everything about them is oppressed, how everything is about hating them, and therefore they have to be treated with kid gloves in every situation, even during a violent confrontation. You simply cannot have a society when you have a belief like this.
Todd?
absolutely right. Everything Auron said before about being a propositional nation also applied to this. It was interesting how he said you can live here, be a citizen, but because of free speech, be in direct opposition to all the things that make for being a citizen. But it's not even, doesn't have to be that direct. When you say, Auron, I believe you said it's maybe we agree that it's just an economic model, an economic zone. Well, even then, that's where I've said regularly, we think of ourselves as consumers way more than we do as citizens. Well, that's also an affront, and it creates this kind of thinking that goes clearly way outside this example, because this example right here, it's not like danger zone example. That's your public schools right there on a daily basis, where we have to just accept that, where they get to come in, and because of their mental state, they get to terrorize all of us. They get to groom all of us. And we just, as Auron said, we just must all, in a way, die. Mm-hmm. It's way, as bad as this is, it's way bigger than there's always going to be incidences with cops and people on the fridge, no matter what. That right there has been normalized every day in the public schools where your kids go.
It's worse than that.
Go ahead.
It's worse than that. I mean, forget the Mitt Romneys of the world marching with BLM. How many pastors across this country, if they were even having church in person in 2020, did the humana at best when it came to BLM and George Floyd?
Yep.
How many of them?
And then like down at their feet and shuffled if they even said, and said it ashamed if they said anything about Roe v. Wade being overturned at all.
Correct. Yes. They bought the canard at best that this was about police violence against minorities. No, it wasn't. It was never about that. It was always about, can we as a people agree that it's okay to mistreat, kill, abuse people based on the color of their skin so long as that skin is white? That's what it always was about. It always was. And the biggest cell phone, and I know this has been a big conversation on the right this week, the biggest cell phone coming out of BLM in 2020, as Auron pointed out in that X post this week, was police body cameras. That was a big cell phone.
To your point, Aaron, I'm still blocked to this day by Loras College here in Iowa, a ostensibly Catholic university, because when BLM got hot and heavy, they were all over it. And I was like counseling them on Twitter. You don't have to do this. We have
a lot of ostensibly Christian colleges, yes. Protestant and Catholic in Iowa, by the way. The thing that's fascinating about this story is by either of the two. So if, you know what, let's play devil's advocate here. Literally. Let's say you're claiming what the conclusion Auron is leaping to, which is that there's a favored class of people that you are not permitted. You cannot discipline them. They're unprosecutable. They're above reproach. They have a higher level of hierarchy than you. And so even to defend yourself against them, you should essentially make your life, you offer yourself up to them as a living sacrifice instead of to the Lord up until to this population. Let's say you think that's way over the top and way radical. Here's the thing. The two dominant worldviews in American culture over the last 160, 70 years have been Christianity and Darwinism. Under both of those worldviews, that cop acted justifiably. Under the strict technocratic utilitarian worldview of Darwinism, this is survival of the fittest, and he has a gun and she has a knife. He is the superior species, right? He is the superior species. He has chosen this. He's gone down the road of survival of the fittest to say, I will live and you will not. So by that worldview, you couldn't chastise him. Under the self-defense is a paragon hallmark of the Christian worldview. That's where the idea of that's one of the founding fundamentals of the Second Amendment in the first place. So then by what other worldview would you possibly claim that cop, when you look at this video, could you watch that video and claim the cop is in the wrong? The only other conclusion I think you can philosophically come to is the one that Auron came to. Because under either a Darwinian view or under a biblical worldview, that was a justifiable act to defend yourself. So then all you're left with then is just saying, because you were attacked by a black person, you're supposed to just sit there and allow it to happen to you. You're not left with anything else. Because neither of the two dominant worldviews in our culture would congruently come to, even within their own structures, congruently come to an opposite conclusion.
No, No, not directly. The only other worldview that allows this is the one of comfort. That just it's not a direct preference for it, but it's just creating the vacuum where it's inevitable, and you don't really care or resent having to do anything about it at all.
What do you think? Let's get to the exit question. What do you think is a true example of racism in America, Aaron?
A true example
a current true example of racism in America.
Kamala Harris's plan that she had to backtrack this week, that she was going to make, I think, interest-free loans available, but only to people.
Is that more weed for black men? Or was it? That's a different plan?
That's a different plan.
Oh, okay, my bad. Yeah. Todd?
The hatred of Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
That's good. Auron?
I mean, as both men have pointed out, the fact that basically throughout our legal code and our institutions, a bias against white individuals, specifically white men, is constant. Be it universities, hiring in any corporation, there is always an innate bias, and it is in many ways instantiated into law.
Let's get to kicker topic. Issue 4, pick one down ballot race this election that you think could upset the conventional wisdom. Todd?
Carrie Lake as just being, I think the conventional wisdom is she's proven to be a disaster of a candidate, but based on just what you said a couple days ago and some numbers you're seeing.
Yeah, I won't go into too many specifics publicly. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but I was given by a little birdie a lowdown on some big money insider polling 2 days ago from all over the country. And the last time this same group polled the Arizona Senate race about a month ago, they had Carrie Lake down by 9. They have her down by 2 right now. So that's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Yep. Aaron?
I'm going Leroy Jenkins here, and I'm going to say just based on the fact...
Leroy Jenkins!
Yeah, we got... There's this thing going around this morning, Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, Bob Casey in Pennsylvania. They're running ads positively invoking Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that kind of echoes things that I've seen in our neck of the woods. Lanon Bakam here in Iowa running for a congressional seat, running on tax cuts for the middle class. Christina Bohannon in my district, a total left-wing nut job, running on border security and baby killing. Mm-hmm. That's what she's running on. I mean, what does that tell you about the environment nationally, too? But I'm going to go Leroy Jenkins. Let's say Bob Casey. I think
Casey loses in Pennsylvania.
Casey loses in Pennsylvania. I don't think it's going to happen, but like I said, I'm throwing a Hail Mary.
Auron?
I guess it's not technically a race, but in Florida, we have several very important ballot initiatives. You already named Amendment 4. I think that is ultimately going to prevail, and I think that there is going to be a real conservatives in the wilderness moment. J.D. Vance said something that wasn't very popular, but I think is very true. The Republican Party is going to have to get a grip on the fact that they returned the fact of abortion back to the states, and the states seem to have wanted Roe. And that's a very difficult pill to swallow for a movement that has fought for several decades. But when you hand things back over to the democratic process, you also have to remember the character of the people can change over many decades. And what I think a lot of conservatives found is actually while they were fighting this battle at the top, at the legislative level, they lost it in the moral and then the cultural level, and they're going to pay a cost.
There's not any real money to be raised or made off of fighting it at the more parochial level, Auron.
Yep, I think that's right.
But there's a ton of money to be raised and to be made by coming up with fake 15-week bans that have no chance of passing that Lindsey Graham goes around the country voicing favor for, just to provide Republicans cover for beliefs that we're now learning with the shibboleth of the Dan Roe v. Wade smashed. We're now learning that many of these Republicans we gave pro-life we blow badges to on their Cub Scout uniforms for 40 years. They really didn't actually believe it. Yet how much money was raised off of telling the brethren the opposite? Mm. I mean,
well, and the people don't believe it.
It is in a universal, what you are saying in a cosmic sense is justice. I hate it. I absolutely hate it because of what it means, what it will mean for the culture, for the soul of the country. But this is the law of sowing and reaping. We chose to turn this into a massive fundraising mechanism almost entirely focused on Washington, D.C. And the depth of the depth is just simply not there. And that bluff is getting called right now. There are two trends in this election that if Trump and Vance are openly running on deport them all, and they are, and they get over 40% of the Hispanic vote doing that is a watershed, right? On the other hand, Trump gets well over 300 electoral college votes, and these life amendments fail everywhere. And in a bunch of states, he's going to win. That's another one too, right? Those are the things that reset coalitions for sure. Let's get to predictions. Todd, I'll start with you.
Well, speaking of reset coalitions, the immediate future of a successful right must deal with something, in my estimation, assuming Trump wins, but more legislatively, etc. It's going to have to deal with the fact that voter turnout in this election will be low, and perhaps as a percentage departure from the previous one, lower than ever before, while simultaneously being a populist election of some sort, which seems to be counterintuitive. A populist reshaping, but the population isn't turning out to vote, but I think that's going to be the reality.
I could see that happening too. I could. Yep. Aaron?
I think we will look back at this election cycle, at least at the very top, as being the most accurate the pollsters have had in the Trump era. And I'm not saying, unless you think that's a good thing right now.
It would be hard for them to be worse.
Yeah.
They're going to try.
Most of these races still are within like a couple of points at best of each other.
Auron?
I think that people need to prepare themselves for the fact that Democrats are not going to certify a legitimate Trump victory if he does achieve one, and that the news media will actively call for political violence in that instance.
Correct.
I mean, you're already claiming, you're already lying that he's going to line up trains, going to burn down, ballot centers. I mean, that's just the next logical step of what their own rhetoric already is, right? My prediction is they're along those same lines, not having any idea what Auron was going to say. There will be at least one more confirmed assassination attempt against Trump between now and the election. At least one more. At least one more. At least. At least. If you can't beat him, beat him. Auron, thank you. Good to see you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, guys.
You bet. Let's lighten the mood here a little bit. Mike Vitkovsky, I think is his last name. Steve, your earbuds are making it look like you're wearing earrings, and it's freaking me out. Does it look like I'm wearing earrings? Does it?
No.
I can barely see them.
No. These look a lot better than
the headphones?
The headphones, yeah.
Yeah. Glad you're freaking you out, Mike.
Actually, now that I'm looking at it,
there's a shiny little
bevel
at
the bottom, yeah.
But is it like Mr. T kind of badass, or no?
Is somebody speaking into your ear like Kamala, giving you tips on what to say?
Just don't develop a lisp, please.
All right, we'll come back. Feedback Friday's next. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erz and Auron MacIntyre, and all of you. And let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing us, steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, TikTok as well. Then don't forget to subscribe to our brand new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. At Deace Show on YouTube. Aaron, by the way, I haven't looked at the new YouTube page's metrics until yesterday.
It's pretty nuts.
What's nuts is we are getting almost as many views
as what I was going to say.
With 5,000 subscribers on this new page as we got on our old page with over 50,000 subscribers.
Correct.
That is nuts.
Yep.
Okay.
The exact URL, I really do not like the way YouTube does this, but the exact URL is youtube.com/@ the @ symbol.
Yeah, it's really
Deace
confusing.
Show.
Yeah. So Deace Show is what you want to subscribe to now on YouTube. It's our brand new YouTube channel as we are trying to just start all over again post-COVID. We got so many strikes telling you so much truth that they hate us there. So we're doing the Google version of when we were kids. and that your dad just told you to unplug the TV and plug it back in. Right. Or, hey, hold up the rabbit ears, just stand right there. Yes, all right. We're doing the Google version of that. We're just going to put in a whole new YouTube page and see if that works. So far, it's working. All right. So keep subscribing at Day Show on YouTube. And then if you listen to the podcast version, you can leave us a 5-star review if you like us. Thank you, all of you who have. And then also hit subscribe or on iTunes follow, and that will make sure every time we do a new episode, it's right there in your feed every single time. Feedback Friday brought to you by our friends over at Preborn. It is worth remembering this year, the Democratic National Convention offered free baby kills in vans right there out on the street. Hard to think of too many things more disgusting and disturbing than that. The man who may be our next vice president doesn't just support baby killing, but he supports doctors being able to murder a child after he or she is born. You cannot overstate the evil of these kinds of things. So this year is being called the baby murder election, and for good reason. Over 64 million lives gone, extinguished from baby murder across the country since Roe v. Wade first enacted. Millions more now hang in the balance. You guys have worked with Preborn to save tens of thousands of babies the last few years with this partnership. Let's keep it going and save even more. When a woman considers murdering her child, she seeks to end her baby's life, and Preborn is there, using the power of ultrasound to confront her with the knowledge that that is another person. But then also, when she chooses life, they are also there to offer her grace and all the support that she needs as well. All of this, by the way, free of charge, even though none of these things are free. And that's where we come in. You can make a tax-deductible donation today to save more lives and save mamas from making mistakes they'll regret the rest of their lives. When you go to preborn.com/Steve, make that donation there today. Dial pound 250, say the keyword baby on your mobile phone, or go to preborn.com/Steve. Again, that is preborn.com/Steve. All right, y'all, ready for some Feedback Friday?
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember the note we got from Erin last week talking about the church she worked at? And she went to the pastor and said, hey, this doesn't ask for the endorsement of a candidate or anything. Can we put in a sign here up on the church grounds about voting against the Kill 'Em All amendment? And the pastor said yes. And then the campus pastor came along, all right, with his low T level and skinny jeans and pleated khakis and sweater vests and talked the similarly sweater vested pastor into taking it out. Remember that?
Oh, sweet Jesus, meek and mild.
Oh, yes. Baby Jesus always. Yes. He's never King Jesus. Never. Here is a follow-up from Erin. Thank you for reading my letter last week, taking the time to respond at length. I have resigned my position as a staff member at the church. I actually resigned the day before you even read my letter on the air. My pastor said he was sad to see me go, but respected my decision, so he wasn't too sad. I'm looking for a new church, starting with the ones that have the vote no signs outside. I know that's not the only thing to look for in a church, but it's a good indication of their willingness to publicly stand for their convictions. Heck yes, it is. Heck yes, it is. I want to share with you a quote from my man, Jack Hibbs. Let me find it here. Quote, there is nothing worse for the witness of the church in America than a saltless, lightless, lukewarm Christian.
Then we're in rough shape.
So if you are in these states, you know what? We were just lamenting what happens and it looks like it may happen. We may lose all these amendments, right? But you know me. I'm the reprogram the Kobayashi Maru guy. I am not the ever just take the L guy. There's always a win. Always a win. Sometimes I got to dig a lot deeper than others, all right? But if there's any positive that would come out of just such an absolutely soulless verdict from the American people. If there's any positive that could come out, here it is. And Erin, you just touched on it. Thank you for the inspiration. I got this idea from you just now. I can't tell you how many times a week I get a note, Steve, I'm looking for a church. Do you have any? Can you help me? And there's some generic things I can help you with, but ultimately, unless I'm not transcendent, omnipresent, I can't visit all these places myself, right? Start with if you're in one of these states with these amendments, start with the churches with the vote no signs in the yard. Start there. Just start there. Now, if there are several, you might vibe better with one. You might agree more with one's open-handed teaching than the other. But if you're looking for how do I narrow it down, because they're not going to advertise on the website, we are completely gutless cowards here. They're not going to put that on the website, guys. So that's one place to start. That's a great idea, Aaron. Start with the ones that have the vote no for baby murder signs in the yard. Start there. Thoughts on that?
What a sad place to be.
I'm trying to come up with the win here, Erzin. Don't you take this away from me.
I'm just saying that that's like the standard for a church. That's what's left. Because so much else has just been cast overboard.
That's the key phrase. Not taken away.
No.
Cast overboard. Just abrogated. Wasn't defeated. Surrendered. We're not interested in fulfilling our calling. We don't want it.
I mean, the early church, the battles that were fought over centuries, because ultimately they were very high-minded, but they were high-minded in the service of ultimately, if we get this wrong, salvation is at stake. People will err. And in terms of defining the Trinity and hypostatic union, and now it's we're a church that thinks you shouldn't kill babies. Folks, we got work to do.
Just, can I follow up? Every now and then I like to check a website, today in Christian history, from the Christian History Institute. And on this day in 1685, King Louis XIV in France, he revoked the edict that allowed for French Protestants, particularly those influenced by French theologian John Calvin. He revoked the edict that allowed the French Calvinists to worship, forcing thousands of them to flee. Now, this isn't to pick on Rome, because during this era, and we've talked about this on the show many, many times over the years, this is what went on for pretty much between the Protestant Reformation and the founding of this country, this is pretty much what went on in Europe. If there was a Catholic king, it sucked for you to be a Protestant or a queen. And if there was a Protestant king or queen, it often sucked for you to be a Catholic. That was just the post-Reformation history of Europe. But imagine the stuff we take for granted. Last week, you got to study Calvin's teachings in France in 1685. A week later, now you may not even be able to friggin' live in France. Find another country. And we're sitting around here just like, we can't put a sign in the yard. That large cloud of witnesses the writer of Hebrews talks about to inspire us to finish our race. I wonder if they ever boo when we don't. Do they just cheer when we run the race and finish it? What about, do they boo when we give up on the race? When we just like, it got hard. Peace out. Like Doughboy at the end of Boys in the Hood. Pour one out. Just pour out the holy water, pour out the communion wine. Just pour one out. Next week, 5 steps to making sure that you are as nice as you can be to the rainbow flag neighbor you have. To do that sermon instead. French Calvinists just woke up this morning, October 18th, 1685, and found out it's not safe for you to be here. 500 years later, I don't think I can put a sign in my suburban mega churchyard anywhere in America. Oh, because of persecution? No, I don't want to. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
And about what it is, I guess the babies are just going to have to die.
The babies are just, you know what? Empathy for everybody, but the babies. Yes. Yes. the toxic empathy our colleague Ali Stuckey wrote about in her book, maybe?
Men without chests. Just everywhere. Everywhere.
I said on matters of importance that I'm retiring sports analogies, and I have wonderful analogies in my mind for this, but it just doesn't paint the accurate picture. There's a lot of people who do not realize they're not maybe even on. They're not merely going down or leading other people down the road to hell. They are paving that road. Just the cowardice, the unchecked, unmitigated cowardice. We just talked about this yesterday in our study of Romans chapter 5. Are we justified or not? Regardless of where you come down on that. Is the battle won or is it not?
What are you prepared to do?
What are you doing? I mean, you should not be afraid of anything. You can't put up a damn sign in your church. It's just evil. It's wicked. And I'm done trying to use sports analogies, and I have a great one in my mind right now, but I'm done using sports analogies to just call this what it is. It is wicked. It is evil. In the name of Christ at that too. Man, you are playing with fire. If you're the leadership of churches like that, they are playing with fire.
Carlotta writes, because we heard about this Million Woman March earlier this week on the show. We had not heard anything about it. I kind of brought it up organically in the context of a conversation we were having. Carlotta writes, I was at this event. It was a day of repentance. It was a day to cry out for this nation. Only one person at the very end made any statement about Trump at all. We were going after the spiritual realm. It was hundreds of thousands, primarily mothers who are crying out for their children. I met people from Norway, Brazil, Australia, and many U.S. states. It was not a Trump rally as the media made it out to be. Lou Engle was one of the first people there to be praying over the nation and the generations of lost children, but he did so in a spiritual warfare posture, not an earthly one. Yes, of course, I would say most of the people there that can vote likely are voting for Trump, but that's not what this was about. And oh, by the way, there was an announcement there, Aaron, for Life Month, that there is now a group coming out of this event that is organizing Life Month marches in June all over the country, hopefully starting next year.
Excellent.
So these are the grinders you guys are looking for. That is from Carlotta, so I thought I would just pass that along.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much for that. Let's go here. Terry Tignor in Virginia Beach, Virginia writes, I found your conversation with Ruth Whitman very interesting and would like to add something to what you discussed. If you guys forgot from earlier this week and haven't gotten to this episode yet, Ruth Whitman has just written a new book about what it means to be a boy mom, and she is really wrestling with her own conscience. She had some very progressive left-wing feminist sensibilities about boys and the place for men in our society until she had 3 of them herself, and now finds herself having more empathy for her young men, but at the same time is struggling with trying to figure out what the balance is there rather than just, accept the natural law of the universe, which is what all the questions I asked in the interview were premised upon. All right. Terry writes, in Genesis, God made one human, Adam. He possessed all the qualities God intended to exist in a human being, but he was alone. God, who had never been alone, put him to sleep and took from him a side, not something from his side. That side God made into another human, whom God called woman. She was given all the characteristics, traits, distinguishing attributes, features, and qualities we have called feminine, and those left in Adam we call masculine. So when God said the two shall become one flesh, he meant the original creation, Adam. This is why marriage is also vital to God's plan, and homosexuality is so contrary. When Ruth said she would rather call the traits human rather than male or female, she was absolutely correct, just not for the reasons that she thought, and she probably doesn't understand why. Prayerfully, someday she will.
Yeah, I think that hermeneutic is
pretty solid.
Is a good starting place for a far deeper conversation about the Imago Dei. Yeah, absolutely.
And this is what you're quantifying here. When Moses writes, he created them male and female in his image. Yeah. He created them, but that's what you're quantifying.
Yeah. And honestly, I think this is a reminder. I mean, pray specifically for Ruth. Pray for people like her, like honest people who are like, she said she changed her mind about some things. They are earnestly searching out truth. Those people are reachable. They are absolutely reachable. We might we will and we do have disagreements, but that emailer just illustrates how like close to the target she is. And I hope that there are more people like her out there in this civilization.
Amen. Ben from Ohio writes, this is a weird one to write. A dream I had this week starts with me in the back seat of a car and Deace, you're driving. Todd's riding shotgun and Aaron is in the back with me, just rolling around the town, chatting. I become aware of a potted tree in the back with me. This tree was infused somehow with the Holy Spirit. You three had been tasked with its safety. I knew this, but proceeded to nonchalantly break a leaf off. Everything in the car other than the people turned black and wilt away to nothing. We're apparently friends in this dream, but you end up disowning the crap out of me. I'm the subject of like 3 straight shows. I'm the most backslidden reprobate who's ever slide-backed, and I'm persona non grata. I woke with the profound sense that I'm going to hell. I don't put a lot of stock into dreams, but this one bugged me. Aaron, interpret.
Put on your coat of many colors.
I think your chakra is very negative. Okay. And I think it's because you probably ate some Casey's pizza that was maybe a few days too old.
That does sound like last night's pizza, man. You're right.
Now you know what it's like just to come to work to Steve Deace every day. I've left many days feel like I've been condemned to hell. So it's just the workplace environment. It's cool. You'll get used to it. Rub some dirt on it.
I think Ben from Ohio needs to get on a starship, go warp speed, head over to Vulcan, meet with T'Pau, okay, and get his Katra back. That was Spock's soul, right? Wasn't it called the Katra? I had to look that up. I remember T'Pau was the name of the Vulcan High Priestess. One of those things I should not remember.
Isn't that the band? Give a little bit of heart and soul.
They got that from that.
Did they really?
That's where they got that from, yes.
Oh my gosh.
The one-hit wonder, the female duet who did Heart and Soul, they named it after the Vulcan High Priestess T'Pau. Yes, that's what it means. Yes.
Amazing.
Again, the kinds of things my wife has often said, if I had not had your children, I'd swear you're still a virgin. Who can know these kinds of things that you can know? And furthermore, and even maybe more importantly, whom would want to? Right. Like, even if you knew that, what normal person wouldn't be like, I'm just going to know it right now. I don't need it. There's no point to it. It's dumb. Really, it's stupid. So I'm moving on. Right.
Steve puts it in the Rolodex.
Instead, I filed that one away. That's going to come in handy someday. Yes.
2024, mark the tape.
Yeah, here we are.
Did it? Told you, losers.
So when I walked out of Star Trek 4 or Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock in 1984, remembering that T'Pau was the High Priestess of Vulcan, it took 40 years for that knowledge to be of use to somebody that was just rattling around back there in my Mega Ram.
Did it?
But here we are. Yes, 40 years. Lynn writes, I'm going to be putting up my Christmas tree soon. Now, before you pounce, Erzin, looking at your
calendar.
Yeah, before you pounce, all right, let's do the Paul Harvey rest of the story, all right? That's going to be the new thing, like the media loves the Republicans pounce story. Any premature acknowledgement of seasons, Erzin pounces. Aaron, we should come up with that story, and Erzin pounce. Yeah, and Erzin
Somebody
pounce.
made a great,
Erzin seizes.
There's
Yes.
a great gif of that, me screaming at you on there about...
Is there?
It's outstanding.
In October of 2020, my grandfather passed away. We weren't able to be in the room with him due to COVID restrictions, and it was horrific. We had to wave goodbye to him through a window. To help deal with his passing and uplift my spirit, I put my Christmas decor up early, and it helped. Since then, I've been putting all the glorious decor up in October. It makes me happy, and in this world of chaos, I take the cheerful where and as long as I can get it. In fact, I'm going to Hobby Lobby tomorrow morning for some Christmas magic. I'm just going to set my feet in joy. Not sure if that makes sense, but oh well. P.S. Check out For King and Country's version of Little Drummer Boy. That is very good, by the way. That's a good recommendation on your part, Len. That song is tremendous. That's a good call there. If you've never heard it, highly would recommend it. But now I don't believe Erzin will pounce now.
I will not pounce. I will honestly advise, because I thought that was tear-jerking. And I totally understand it.
And he's got a heart of vinegar, but he still has a heart.
And I think you went to the right place to find your comfort. I would say, I would think about that weaning and ultimately putting it back. I'm not saying next year. I think that's a course you want to go on, because we as humans, for right reasons, do things that then often, you go off tangent a little bit, but this gap keeps getting wider and wider in ways that you don't fully understand. My advice to you would be ultimately to put it back to when you used to do it, because I think it'll keep things in the proper proportion. But thank you for sharing that story, because I was absolutely moved by it. And
Amen.
I'm so sorry for, once again, COVID, man. Just raw evil. Raw evil.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Let's finish with this. How about the fact we've got an abbreviated Feedback Friday, because we got our friend Dr. Molly James coming on.
And we've already done more.
And we've done more than we do, and normally we have an entire hour.
The same thing.
Okay. Yes, my friend, I should have mentioned at the top of the show. Our good friend Dr. Molly James is coming on here in about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. She, just like she did when she ran to New York at the advent of COVID, she runs to the battle. She's been in North Carolina now. I think this is her second week. She just, got up from where she practices medicine in Missouri and just saw there was a need and went out there. So we want to get a report from what she's seeing on the ground out there. That's coming up at the bottom of the hour. Evan writes, if they're going to claim that there is a right to murder babies, then conservative pharmacists, Christian pharmacists, pro-life pharmacists in states where it's legal should refuse to fill prescriptions for these baby murder pills they're sending out all over the country. We were told during COVID that pharmacists had a right to refuse to fill ivermectin prescriptions, for example. So we should use the same mindset and refuse to fill baby murder pills. I like this so much, Evan, but I'm going to take it one step further. No Christian pharmacist anywhere, whether it's legal or not, should ever fill one of these, and should contemplate that they are in violation of their faith and have sinned by doing so. There is a higher law here. And as believers, we are citizens of another kingdom. And when the earthly kingdom goes awry, we don't get to do, is it the 11th commandment, when in Rome, do as the Romans? Is that the 11th commandment? It is not. No. So I would go even further and say, under no circumstances ever should a believing pharmacist ever fill one of these prescriptions, ever, under any conditions, period. But back to your original premise, sure. I mean, this is hoisting from their own petard, as Shakespeare would put it. This is one of my 10 commandments of political warfare. Reverse your opponent's premise and use it against him. Okay. If we're going to say we can deny life-affirming and life-saving care like you guys wanted to do during COVID, we're not filling any of these scripts for these baby murder medicines. We're just not going to fill them. Because they're not medicines. They're murder weapons. I like them apples. Aaron.
Say a pharmacist does this. Why are you doing this? Well, I'm following my Christian conscience. You dig down a little bit deeper. It's because the Steve Deace Show provoked me. The Steve Deace Show should not be the one provoking this conversation. The only reason we do it is because it's not being done in the churches.
Correct.
And I'm not trying to blackpill. I'm not trying to bellyache. And I know it's incredibly negative. But a pharmacist saying, I'm not doing this because it's my conscience and it was pricked by the Steve Deace Show. No, a pharmacist saying, I'm not doing this and my pastor and my entire church is backing me up. That packs a bigger wall up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where we are. I mean, these need to be conversations that are held at the church level, intra-church level. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I can't say that it is, at least not in mass.
And what this goes beyond abortion to healthcare in general, transgenderism, medicine, health of every kind. The West. Steve, you've just, in the last couple of weeks, it's come up in different contests, like how every issue is a theological issue. Mm-hmm. My third daughter is a junior in high school, and she's just now starting to awaken. I think I might want to be a nurse. Mm-hmm. and we're starting to have conversations like this, like how going into that field is, we've seen on numerous issues, COVID, these are the high priestesses. You can't naively go into the science. And I think that speaks exactly what Aaron is saying. Our church has got to start being wise as serpents and understand what the hell is going on out there, because it doesn't right now.
Serendipitously, this quote just showed up in my feed from J.I. Packer. The Christian's motto should not be let go and let God. It should be trust God and get going. That's basically what we're talking about.
Agreed. I completely agree. It's why I said when you went on your hermeneutic, your Catholic hermeneutic yesterday, I mean, I understand the full context of what you are saying, but from before we get to the fuller context of the Catholic Protestant argument there, I am far more concerned about the fact that the modern evangelicalism has just told people that they don't have to do anything, that there's nothing, no requirement, and not only that, even if you think there is no requirement, you don't want to do anything. You don't want to show the loyalty to your Lord. You don't want to show love to your Lord. You don't want to show obedience to Him. No. You're not anxious to stand for Him after what He went through and endured for you. Before we even get to justification by faith and works and what the ratio is there, and does faith produce works? Does work produce faith? How about let's start with a very basic principle.
Do something.
Do something with what God gave you. Let's start with that. How about, can we just, before there was a justification by faith and faith and works, there was a guy named Polycarp. Long before we had this debate, there was a guy named Polycarp. And he said, hey, how can I, after these 81 years and when my Lord has been this faithful to me, how can I now deny Him? Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. They burned him alive after he said that. Okay. So I want to make sure everybody understands that this, it doesn't always end well in this life when you go down this road, but this life is not all there is for us.
We're the damn fools who think putting the sign out in the yard is the same thing as getting burned alive.
Putting the sign in the yard does not make you Polycarp.
No.
Okay? But it makes you more than like a carp, which is like one of the worst bottom feeders of ocean life. And that's really what we are producing from a discipleship standpoint in the American church, bottom feeders. Bottom feeders. I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't forget, before we even get into these doctrinal debates, where's your desire? Where is your desire to say, I cannot believe what my Lord did for me, and the least I could do in return is give Him all that I have. What does offer your body up as a living sacrifice that Paul's going to say later in our Roman study? What does that mean? It means that. That's what it means. More in a moment. Hey folks, I know you guys ask me every now and then, hey, how do we get those new logoed cups? Some of the other swag you guys see us wear or drink out of here on the show. We've got merch for all of our shows here at The Blaze. You can shop our merch store at shopblazemedia.com. Get our pro-life hero mug in, I guess you could say, honor of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The brand new show logo we came up with earlier this year with the truth be told there and the candle shining in the darkness and more. And you can get all the cool stuff for all of the shows here at The Blaze. When you go to shopblazemedia.com, use the promo code Steve10. You'll get 10% off your order if you do. Use the code Steve10 for 10% off your order when you go to shopblazemedia.com, code Steve10 for the discount at shopblazemedia.com. Well, just as she ran to the battle at the outset of COVID, our good friend, Dr. Molly James, has done the same with what is going on there in North Carolina. Molly, good to see you again. How are you?
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me back on.
So tell the audience exactly where in North Carolina are you right now?
Well, I'm not in North Carolina right now. I had to come home. I rotated out on Sunday night.
Okay.
We are in Avery County Airport. That is a private airfield in one of the affected areas. It was an airstrip that had maybe 3 flights a week, and people came together and used that as an operating hub, and they had 200 flights out in one day. So pretty incredulous.
You were there for what, almost 2 weeks? You were on the ground there in North Carolina?
8 days or so, first round, and trying to get back, just trying to keep things going at the clinic as well.
Describe the scene of what you saw, and in fact, let's go to the very beginning. When you first got off the plane and got there to the scene of where you were going to serve, just as you kind of surveyed where things were at, your immediate reaction was what?
Yeah, so there were a lot of logistical challenges. We flew in not knowing where we were going to sleep and where we were going to work. We flew into Charlotte, and one of the primary concerns as we landed is what roads and highways were open. So we actually made contact with somebody who had been in the area and told us which highways. And as we were going, one of my patients called and found an Airbnb for us outside of the affected area. We made contact after contact, and eventually we were invited to come to Avery County Airfield and set up a field hospital. So we were the first medical on scene there.
And what was the level of devastation that you saw there when you guys arrived?
So we arrived about 8 days in, so it wasn't as much a trauma recovery as it was roads were out. They were still finding people that hadn't been touched from the ground. These are winding, high mountains, high hills, winding roads, and lots of people are out in the haulers. So they're behind one road, and if that road is out, nobody had been up to talk to them. They didn't have power. They didn't have running water. They didn't have electricity or cell service to call out to tell people they were there. So it was literally a blind search and rescue.
Would you say it was what you feared, worse than you feared, not as bad as you feared? And because if you got there 8 days in, you could reasonably backtrack then about the amount of progress that was made in those 8 days right before you guys get on the ground there. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there were certainly areas that were completely washed away, and the devastation, it just cannot even be relayed through videos and verbal reports. It's just beyond what you can imagine. There was a railroad audio video or sensor that showed a 40-foot wave of water coming down in the ridges.
Wow.
In the valleys. So you can imagine the devastation that caused it. Washed out fire trucks and semi-trailers end on end. I didn't see a lot of that. I was focused on the medical mission, so they weren't taking us into places like that. They were taking us into where we could access through an ATV. There were forward teams going first to open the roads before we would go with them.
I want to be as fair as possible. And not politicize a tragedy. It's hard not to hold everybody to the standard of what people have seen with Governor DeSantis and his administration in Florida, where they had back-to-back Category 5 storms, and pretty much everybody's already got power and everything else there in the state of Florida. But in fairness to the government of North Carolina, the state of Florida has a lot more practice where this is concerned, right? And that is a state that has more of a rural community than a state of Florida does. So I want to be as fair as possible. So with that in mind, what would you say about the state of preparedness when you arrived in terms of not the logistics of reaching these people in these remote or mountainous regions is a sunk cost, right? That's going to be difficult no matter who's in charge. But in terms of the supply chains and things of that nature, how prepared would you say they were for something like this there?
Yeah, to have a hurricane in a mountain area, it's just a totally different scenario than Florida, right? So Florida's done this over and over. Everybody knows what to do and what to expect. In talking last night, Margot from North Carolina on Twitter was on and said, they actually expected it to hit in a different region than where it came. I think it went east of where they thought it was going to be. So they were prepared in her area, but the area that got hit was not. As far as supply chains, the civilian volunteers, the missionaries, the non-government organization groups have come together and assembled de novo a supply chain to get things to the people on the ground. Civilian helicopters. Again, everything we were doing at Avery County Airport is civilian volunteers. So these are people donating their aircraft, donating the fuel, donating their time. We had access to a Black Hawk that would fly people on missions and deliver goods up to the mountain where people couldn't get down, or they couldn't get a big enough payload up through the ATVs to deliver their supplies. And that was donated and supplied by individuals. So I don't know if they could have been more prepared just because this is such an abnormal occurrence.
You mentioned a lot about what charitable private organizations had prepared and have done on the ground, what you saw in North Carolina. Where was the state of North Carolina? Where was FEMA? What did you observe where the public entities were concerned when you were there?
Yeah, so I went across 4 counties. I did not encounter FEMA. That's just my observation. I was in a very small footprint, so that's my personal reporting and experience. We were working closely with the local authorities in the county, people who knew the actual, the residents in the area. That's who we were working with and partnering with. They were very distrusting of people coming in they didn't know to offer help, and so going with a local and being introduced personally gave us a lot of credibility. And once people understood we weren't from the government, they actually appreciated the help and accepted it a little bit easier. Toward the end of the week last week, we did see military deployments coming in and taking high-level ATVs, UTVs with heavy payloads up the mountain with food and supplies.
I want to figure out how to ask this without putting you too much on the spot. I can't, so I'm just going to ask it. Were you satisfied with the level of response that those who were suffering were receiving outside of just you guys' own particular efforts with what you saw?
Yeah, I think the need is infinite, and so it's hard to say that as it's ongoing, right? Because there's so much chaos on the ground, and there isn't a central command. These are individual people. So do I think there's an adequate response? No. There are people who are sleeping in tents and in their cars and don't have a shelter to go to. But also you have to keep in mind everything's complex. As we went up to visit people, or they were offered to come down and stay, they didn't have anywhere to go to, and they said, "I'm not leaving my home. I don't have a place to go to. This is my residence, and I'm staying here." These are fairly independent people. Some of them live off grid, and they're self-sufficient. So they said, "Hey, we're good for 6 months. Just check back on us. We'll be fine." So you have all kinds of independent spirit there too. That we have to keep that in mind. That not everybody wants help, and they're survivalists. Many of them.
What's the long-term prognosis for the communities that you saw, do you think?
So I originally went totally blind. I don't do disaster response, so I just had a calling and went. And once I got on the ground, I said, we're going to commit to 4 weeks to staff this field hospital. That's probably shifted now to a 4 to 6 month plan. People are looking out 120 plus days, and to rebuild power and water in these areas could take 6 months or so, is what I'm hearing. That's not my field of expertise, but I have to trust the people who do that every day. There were linemen everywhere working to try to get power reestablished. As you can imagine, they're up in the mountains and in the hills, so that's not a straightforward repair.
Wow. Can you share some stories of some of the people that you encountered, had a chance to help, treat, or see people that were helping their neighbor and helping others while you were there, your first time?
Sure. Yeah. So there were people who, again, had been stuck in their homes for 2 weeks. We were there about the 2 to 3 week mark of all of this happening. So nobody had talked to them. They didn't have resupply of medications. Their oxygen concentrators and CPAP machines couldn't be plugged in. So they'd been without those for several days. So we would replenish that. You have people living in 3 to 6 inches of mud. So we had a patient who had a foot amputation and was walking in, 3 inches of mud and dirt and sewage, and we're concerned about an infection in the stump. So we were able to triage her, assess that it wasn't anything that needed surgery, get her IV antibiotics, get her hydrated, and her blood sugars came down from 600 to 100 in 24 hours. We had another gentleman who was delivering supplies to his community who had a chemical burn on the back of his hand. We were able to provide wound care and treat that. They're just starting to find out that we are there as a medical resource for them. The clinics are overwhelmed. The hospital is operational. I don't think they do outbound missions, though, so we were filling a gap in that need. There's people who are so fragile they can't come down these roads in an ATV, so we just have to go to them, and we'll have to continue to go to them for a long time.
Molly, some of what you're describing, I mean, obviously we have way more infrastructure here, so, the recovery will not devastate it for 2 decades like the earthquake in Haiti did. But kind of what you're describing is, I mean, that level of just devastation of, even with all of our modern technology and amenities that we have here in the richest country, first world country in the world, You're describing, the kinds of scenes that Americans just don't typically watch or see. I mean, in some respects, this sounds even more devastating than Katrina.
Yeah, I would have to say this is on par with one of the worst things I've ever been involved with. Entire towns, entire villages wiped off the mount like mudslide. They're gone. You can see on Twitter, I've reshared a lot of people I know who are traveling through those areas and filming it. You need to look at those videos. These homes, it's not like one home is damaged. The entire neighborhood is gone. So I think there's a lot of people still unaccounted for. And the focus is going to be on that once they knew they had everybody treated and found that they could. So it was a shift from search and rescue to search and recovery while I was there.
Your thoughts moving forward now that you've been there, you're going to be going back here again soon. So what are your thoughts kind of moving forward about this story and the outcome?
Yeah, I was blessed to be included. This is what America's all about, is people helping people and coming together and make things happen. And nobody was asking who you're voting for. Nobody was asking who do you pray to and who do you love as they were, providing response. It was just people coming together. Miracles happened every day. I can't even begin to start to describe all of the things that just lined up in a way to keep this operation moving seamlessly and get to as many people as possible.
All right, folks, if you want to support the people there in North Carolina and also specifically the work that Dr. Molly James and her associates are doing, here's a couple of options of where you can go. All right, so you can write these websites down. judgesrescue.org. That's judgesrescue.org. That's one of the places that you can go to. And it's judgesrescue.org. Another place where you can go is hopemill.org. hopemill.org. And again, I've gotten lots of notes from people asking me, hey, who's credible to donate to? So, if these come with Molly's recommendation, that's good enough for me. hopemill.org. Again, hopemill.org. And then your clinic, where you guys work there at jamesclinic.com, you guys have a Venmo as well that people can donate to, Molly, if they want to do that. Can you give us that information?
At JC Missions. I would definitely go through the primary links on our website because there are scammers that have popped up and we don't want that money diverted. It's going to be part of a larger mission. And so we are setting up a 501c3 currently to formalize this process and our involvement in these missions going forward.
JC there for James Clinic. JC there for James Clinic. So JC Missions is the Venmo there if you want to donate to the work that Molly and her clinic there are doing. JC Missions is the Venmo there. So phenomenal work. As soon as I heard you were running there, wasn't surprised at all, given what I know about you. So thank you as always for all the work you guys do. Molly, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Thanks, Steve.
You bet. Take care. God bless. What do you guys think?
If the forces of light, win this election with not perfect choices, I think it's going to be because we find the Molly James in us. To just go there, to feel called, to not know the roads Trump and company and everybody else might take us down, but we want, there's darkness there and somebody's got to deal with it, and we want to be the light. We don't know if that road is washed out, if it doesn't exist. We don't know what we're going to find when we get there. We don't even know what some of the real problems are. We just know it's up to us. I love that. I love that spirit in Molly James, and it's in all of us if we want to let God be our guides and stop sitting on the sidelines and expecting somebody else to do something.
Yeah, there are just things that happen, and it happens in everyone's life. And I invoked this yesterday in overtime, the Gandalf quote. It's just up to us to figure out what we want to do with the time that we're given. There are things that happen in each of our lives that you could not predict, that you could not prepare for, that you could just never see coming in a million years. And sometimes those things just suck. It's like nobody's fault, but they just suck. A hurricane in the mountains, you're never going to predict that. You're never going to be able to be prepared for that. But hearing from or about accounts of a number of people who are affected, they have just decided that it is up to us. And I love hearing that independent spirit, not only from Molly, the spirit that she brings to the table, as Todd was just talking about, but the people of North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, just deciding, it's up to us. Nobody's coming for us, and we don't want that anyway. That's simultaneously in the midst of disaster, and in some cases despair. There are lights that shine ever more brightly because of that despair and because of that darkness. And it should be inspiring to each and every one of us.
Amen to that. Final thoughts from today's show, 30 seconds to go. Either one of you?
It was a good one, I think. Our Auron conversation went down all kinds of very interesting roads about what it means to be a country, what it means to be a citizen, and how lazy and ridiculous a lot of our definitions have become.
Yeah, I think the theme, and you've brought this up a number of times, but we hit on it a little bit during the Deace Group, certainly during Feedback Friday, certainly during yesterday's Theology Thursdays at DL Moody's. I like my way of doing things better than your way of not doing anything. That should be the theme of everyone moving forward.
Amen to that. Hope you all have a great weekend. We're back at it again on Monday. Until then, Romans 8:28.